Hi, my name is Stacey. Here I am in front of a shearing shed at Savernake Station in southern New South Wales. As you can see, the shearing shed is very old. It was built in 1912 and it's still used today. Inside the shearing shed is a large piece of paper nailed to the wall. Let's go inside and have a look. For nearly 150 years, this piece of paper has been recording something pretty important. It's a bit dirty in places, but if we look closely, it tells a pretty interesting story.
This piece of paper shows how the Sloane ancestors, since 1863, have been recording the rainfall for our property. It shows how variable our rainfall has been from highs to lows. It tells us that since the records were first started, the rainfall has varied from year to year. Some years we get lots of rain and good crops, even floods. Some years we have less rain or dry years, poor crops, even droughts. So this piece of paper tells us that this part of the Murray-Darling Basin has had wet years and dry years, floods and droughts, good years and bad years.
So Anne, is this the same in other parts of the Murray-Darling Basin?
Oh yes, it is. The Murray-Darling Basin is one of the largest in the world, but it's also one of the driest. The rainfall across the basin is highly variable from year to year, as we can clearly see on our rainfall chart.
So where does all this rain come from? You might say it simply just falls out of the sky, but in the Murray-Darling Basin, it's a bit more complicated than that. It is all tied up with what we call the water cycle, or more simply, the way water moves around, literally in cycles or circles. This amazing water cycle starts in the sea, where most of the world's water is found. As the air above the sea warms, the water changes from drops into gas or vapour. This is called evaporation. This vapour then travels with winds and enters the Murray-Darling Basin from all directions. When this water vapour crosses the land, it starts to cool down and begins to create clouds. This is called condensation. As the clouds cool and they travel over hills or mountains, the vapour turns back into drops and falls as rain, snow or hail. This is called precipitation. When this rain falls, some soaks into the ground. Some of the water is taken up by plants and given off as vapour. We call this transpiration. Some water soaks deep into the ground and is known as groundwater. The rain that doesn't soak into the ground or is taken up by plants runs downhill into creeks, rivers, lakes and wetlands. The creeks and rivers flow downhill and slowly make their way into our rivers and eventually the sea. Because of the variable rainfall, some rivers in the Murray-Darling Basin don't flow all year round. In fact, they may even dry up some years, like the Darling River does. When the rivers do flow, they eventually join the Murray River, which flows to its end near Goolwa in South Australia. At the end of the Murray, or at its mouth, the remaining water flows into the sea. And yes, you guessed it right, the whole process starts all over again. That's why we call it the water cycle.